Today is about transformative travel, and it's about becoming enlightened through your travel experiences. My name is Renee, and I'm with We Blog the World, which is an online travel magazine dedicated to adventure travel and culture, and Blue Soul Travel, which I do with my partner, who was supposed to be here today, but I'm going to be doing this solo. We lead spiritual and mindfulness experiences and journeys around the world on sacred land. So we're going to start out with just a short 3-minute, 20-second video on transformative travel that we put together. And it's really just going to kind of give you an overview to help lead you into some of the points that I'm going to cover, which is really about the internal journey. So a lot of adventure travel, right, when we think about adventure travel, it's really about that external journey, the external activities, the external things that we do. And today we're going to focus on that internal journey, right, which is probably a little different than anything else that you're going to hear at the travel show. All right, so we're just going to kick off with this video and then we'll get started.
Let's talk about the power of transformative travel. Transformative experiences often happen when we fully immerse ourselves in discovery, adventure, and trying the unknown. We learn to overcome our physical and emotional fears and obstacles. We learn about new customs, cultures, languages, and even develop new skills. We begin to respect animals, big or small, whether they're on the land or deep within our oceans. We begin to see nature as part of us and us part of it, the interconnectedness of all living things. We gain more confidence and courage. We become more resilient to handle the challenges we face on and off the road. The human spirit comes alive. We become empowered to reach new heights and see things with fresh eyes. We become fully expressed and learn to feel things we may shut out at home. We are most alive and awake when we are pushing boundaries, stretching our limits, and moving beyond our comfort zone. It allows us to develop new values and create new truths that are aligned with purpose and a deeper calling. We stop seeing things and people in categories such as rich or poor, black or white, Christian or Muslim. We simply see what is, the beauty of all that is. When we look inward rather than outward, we discover new ways of looking at ourselves and the world. When we simply allow, transformation begins to take place, and not just in a destination, but deep inside ourselves. We begin to develop a deeper sense of who we are and what is truly important in the world. We find meaning where there wasn't before. When we venture out into the world with compassion, love, and understanding, it doesn't matter whether we are Mexican, Israeli, Kenyan, Chinese, Iranian, or Brazilian. It becomes about the heart. It becomes about our inner truth. We can sit and reflect in ways we never could before. Just sit and be. In these moments, we don't judge other cultures or ourselves. We honor the sacredness of all that is. We suddenly have empathy beyond what we've ever known. For transformative travel isn't about knowledge or what we've been taught. It's a deep nosedive into the unknown, a rethinking of what we have learned and what we once thought to be true, internally and externally. Transformative travel is a spiritual journey. It's magic and mystery for your body, your mind, and most importantly, your soul. Are you ready to take a journey with us?
Transformative travel, right, is being used more and more, and when you think about how it's depicted externally, right, it's a lot about the exploration versus the arranged. So that inward journey versus the bucket list, right? So it's about going deep within yourself and really figuring out why you're traveling to begin with. It's proactive, right? Where it's really a discovery process and it's engaged, versus reactive where you're just the observer and you're simply following a guide. So yeah, it's all those things, right? That's how you've probably heard it described, but above and beyond all of those things, after traveling to 92 countries and living in 12, we've really realized, right, that it's more of a mindset and something we call a heart set, right? And that's really showing up to your travel experiences in a completely different way. So that's what we're going to talk about, is how to get into that, ignite that internal compass within us so we start traveling differently than we ever have before. First, we're going to start with, right, the discomfort. So if you're at an adventure travel show, chances are you're better with discomfort than others, right? Or you wouldn't be here. But, these are the external forces, right? These are the things that we physically do to make us feel alive that we wouldn't have done otherwise. So things like jumping out of airplanes and parachuting and, going on a trek through the jungle, right? An elephant coming face to face with a shark in the water. So these are the external things that we do that make us feel alive, right, as human beings. It really reminds us what it is to be human. And that's what draws a lot of us to adventure travel to begin with. But then there's another part of getting out of our comfort zones, right? And this is even harder than jumping out of a parachute, I would argue. And that's really, doing the deep inner work, right? Reflecting on your travel whys. Why are you traveling to begin with, right? And this really involves getting out of the ego mindset. So you're probably sitting here thinking, God, there's a lot of spiritual terminology here. Am I really at a travel show, or am I at a mindfulness and consciousness conference? And the reason that we're talking about that is because when you get really centered in your core, right, which is a lot of the work that we do at Blue Soul Travel, right, you're kicking ego to the door. And you're finding your center and your purpose before you even go on a trip. And it only took me about 30 or 40 countries before I really started to go inwards, right, and really reflect on why I was showing up in the first place. Really being present with people. And when you do that, right, there's a realization that you're interconnected to everything on the planet. So trusting in your intuition is really key here. So if that word doesn't resonate with you, we could also call it your internal compass, right? We all know when we've had it, right? These are the aha moments that we've had on the road where we really trust in our higher self. And again, we go inward and reflect on what brings us joy, not the external rewards, right? And I think a lot of times when we first start traveling, we're in it for the external rewards, the quick thrills, but they're not really sustainable. And so, you've heard this said a million different times, right? It's about the journey, not the destination. So it's really becoming aware, especially now, as we're coming out of a pandemic, right? It's traveling in a whole different way, and you're not going to making decisions from a place of judgment or fear. Right? And so it's really kind of showing up really connected to that. And then there's that moment, if you travel long enough, where there's something inside of you that just truly wakes up, right? And then suddenly, right, even if you're an adventure travel junkie, right, if you don't make time for silence and being connected to the earth and connected to nature, you're really missing, I would argue, 90% of it. So transformative experiences, they become your new normal, right? When you're more of an active participant with an open mind and your willingness to shift your worldviews. How many times have we've gone to a new country and you're like, yeah, I'm open-minded, I can handle any new culture and custom, that's why I love travel so much. But then something shakes you up and turns you upside down. And then you have to really rethink your whole worldview. And right, that transforms you, doesn't it, right? It turns your life upside down and inside out. And what it also allows you to do is really setting intentions that speak to your soul. It's not the human journey, right? This is the soul's journey that we're talking about. And so when we are aligned in what I call centered, and anyone who's ever done Qigong or Tai Chi, right? They know that, the manipulation of energy. You're grounded, you're balanced, you're connected to the earth. And so when you're in that place, it also means that you are saying no to things that are not aligned with who you are, not aligned with what you're, that speaks to your soul, right? So how to start that inward journey? It really starts with being okay where you are. So I don't know about you, but a lot of times we kind of think we should be somewhere when we're 25 or 30 or 50 or 60. And this transfers over to travel, doesn't it? Right? It does. And if you're not centered and grounded and connected and aligned, right, all that stuff is just going to follow you on your travel journey. So you go through the motions, but you won't really be connected to them. So it really does require a mindset, trusting, letting go, and really being okay with where you are. So we put together a few sort of tips and things on that inward journey that Anthony and I have learned over the years that really kind of help ignite that inner compass that we're talking about. And so one is intention creation, right? This has a lot to do with manifestation in our lives, right? The moment that we write something down or we verbalize it, it gives it more meaning. It gives it more meaning and it sets things into motion. And, this might be something you've heard, right, many times, but a lot of times, if we're not traveling solo, we're traveling with a partner. And how many of you felt this, right, where one of you, right, opposites attract, right? One of you is more the adventure person, the other one's more of the planner. And, if you've got to travel together, right? We've all been there. And how do you travel in that way where one of you wants to have no plans and just kind of be open to what emerges, and then the other one is like, no, I got to have everything organized. So, it's really a conversation about being open for the unexpected, because this is when the real, true magic moments happen. Purpose, contribution, and ecotourism. If we had more time, I could spend an hour alone on ecotourism. It's that important. There's so many ways to show up and contribute and give back, and this becomes a really profound, transformative part of the way that you travel. So, I'm not in my 20s anymore. I can't just go somewhere and hang out for a month or two like I did when I traveled in my youth. But a lot of organizations now, you don't have to spend a month or 6 months. You can actually contribute your time for an hour or 2 hours or an afternoon. The Jamaica Rock House Foundation, it's an organization for kids with special needs, and you can show up and teach your skills. And you're really making a difference when you commit. You think that it's sort of a contribution that you're making, but guess what? You get turned upside down and transformed from simply offering your time. And then, of course, animal lovers. There's local animal rescue. I'm a big dolphin fan, so injured dolphins and elephant sanctuaries, you can actually get involved, right, in some of these organizations and knowing more about how the way our elephants are treated. It's a big deal, actually. So the more that we're aware, the more that we can support these causes. And then, of course, as a water baby, I'm a big water person. We live on the water, and cleaning up our reefs, right? I'm old enough where I used to snorkel and dive in the 80s and 90s, and our reef is dying. Our reef is dying. So there are programs that you can get involved in where you can actually replant the reef. Deepen your connection to nature. These are some of our favorite things that we've done to really ignite that internal compass that we're talking about here. Swimming with beluga whales and walking with polar bears in Churchill Wild. Super amazing place. Not easy to get to. Three flights to get there, buses and so forth. A truly profound experience to be out there among the polar bears in the wild. In African safari, there's lots of vendors here that can set you up with safaris. I've lived in Africa a few times, so for me that was, it's just to be among, the wild in their natural habitat is just, sleeping under the stars is truly transformative. Iceland, Norway, anywhere where they have the northern lights, even if you've been to these countries before, you have to plan certain times of the year, right? Because those are the only times that you can see the northern lights. The Galapagos Islands is one of my favorite places for bird life, animals, and the sacredness of the land. You truly feel a sacredness here. it's undeniable, right? And so any way that you can get there, and a lot of times people think, it's very expensive to go to the Galapagos, and it can be. But, if you have even just a few extra days, one of the ways that we did it is we showed up, right? And we booked the tour when we landed. You can literally book a tour when you land. And it's about a tenth of the price, by the way. So you have to have the courage to do that. But I can assure you, there's always things going, every few days, different boats that you can get. And that's a way to really get to the Galapagos in a much more affordable way. And then forest bathing. How many of you know what forest bathing is? This is super inexpensive. It's a new trend, right? This is like sitting and immersing yourself in the woods, right? It sounds kind of boring, right? But it's not. And they're combining things like sound healing and sound journeying in the forest, and it's really amazing just to connect with the trees. And then, we're huge fans, and the work that we do is getting back to the wisdom of our indigenous elders, right? We have forgotten that. And, we used to always use natural herbs from the plants, right, to heal ourselves. And now what do we do in the West? We just go to pharma, right? So you can spend time with a natural herbalist and find out some of these medicinal benefits of plants, right? So this is just our site, weblogtheworld.com. You can go there. There's nothing selling anything to you. This is pure editorial content. So it's like a magazine, so you can go there and just read about some of these things that we've been talking about on the nature side. Dog sledding in Alaska, the Galapagos, which we just spoke about. Of course, Costa Rica is one of my favorite countries, very similar to Ecuador in that it's very pro-ecotourism. And if you are a bird lover, right, this is the place where you can see quetzals and yukons. And then, of course, Northern Lights in Iceland, Norway, and so forth. So health and well-being. A lot of times you may not think that adventure travel and health and well-being go together, but I would argue that sometimes when we overstimulate ourselves, right, through adventure travel, we come home and then we feel that we need a vacation. A vacation from the vacation, right? How many times have people felt that? Like, oh my God, I had this amazing experience and I did all of these things, but you're exhausted. So, we're certainly active too, but it's like if you don't give back to you, right? And you're probably hearing a theme here. The theme is really going inside, right? And being okay with you and connected with you. So, consider a wellness getaway. There's so many different ways you can do it. If you've experienced any trauma, I don't mean trauma from war, that kind of trauma, but just childhood trauma, right? There's horse and equine therapy, right? Where you're literally working with horses that can help some of those dark night shadows of the soul, right? Super powerful stuff. And then, of course, Eastern Europe is known for holistic and integrative therapy. We've been media partners with the healing hotels of the world for a few years now. We love what these guys are doing. And they also do a show every year in Europe called Healing Summit. I think their next one is going to be in Portugal. And then, of course, in Croatia and the Czech Republic, we had an opportunity for about a month to go and review a whole bunch of medical spas in the Czech Republic. And they're truly integrating both traditional Western medicine with integrative. So at very affordable prices compared to what it would be in the United States. So the extraordinary. So if you read our site, you probably haven't read our site, but if you go to our site, you're probably going to see that we're huge fans of Iceland. And a lot of times when people go to Iceland, they think of the Blue Lagoon and they'll do that wonderful, beautiful nature tour in the south of the island that takes about 3 or 4 days, right? Of course you should do that. And then, of course, in the far east of the country, there's the icebergs. And that's a must-do, right? So these are must-dos. But the country's so small, right? So go up to a farm, there's no tourists there. None. There's just tiny little puffin birds in abundance everywhere, and thermal waters that you don't even pay to go in these thermal waters. So Turks and Caicos. So I don't know if any of you have been to Turks and Caicos, but the main place where you land, it's pretty commercial, right? Still. So if you want to venture out and really get away from it all and get back to that internal compass again, you have to take a boat and get over to Middle Pecos, and North Pecos is even further. The main two reasons to go there and really make the extra trek, first of all, their reef is not dead. It's alive and kicking. So it's incredibly beautiful. And the second thing, I had gone to an astronomy conference. The reason they had it down there is because the stars are just so profound, right? And you can see them for miles and miles. I mean, it's just eternity. So two main reasons to go there. I mentioned safari in northern India, largely because I'm much more experienced in safaris in Africa, and the only one that I did do in northern India really did shape my foundation, because it's a very, very different energy. And so if safaris are your thing or something that you've been exploring, I would encourage you to do both, because they're completely different experiences. Solomon Islands is a place that Anthony and I went to for about a month, right before the COVID lockdown. Thankfully, right? Because it takes a lot of flights to get there. There's only one flight a week flying in. So one of the things that you can do, talk about a transformative place, is that you can pair the trip up with Fiji. So you can land at Fiji, spend a week in Fiji, or however long you want to do, and then make sure you match up your flight to catch a flight to the Solomon Islands. And guess what? There's not a lot there. So if you want luxury, there is actually one 5-star luxury hotel there that I think the English royal family had stayed in. You should really go in there for the nature. The key thing I want to mention, though, there's thousands and thousands of islands here that are remote, and they will drop you off on your own remote island. And this is not expensive, guys. It's unbelievable, right? Very inexpensive. They'll drop you off and leave you there for a day, and you can see to eternity. There's not another person. And it's a little scary, right? Because it's like, okay, are they coming back? You just got your picnic lunch, but really just amazing to see the eternity. And the water is so crystal clear, and the reef is not dead. And then lastly, a lot of people don't know about the Solomon Islands. It's the last place they did headhunting. Yes, really. And there's a place called Skull Island. It is not a tourist attraction. I'll start by saying that. We were very lucky because, we're press, so we were there with the tourism board who had lined up an excursion for us. And you can do that, but it would be literally you and your partner, right? If you're traveling with another partner. You don't go with a tour. So you'll go with someone who really knows the land and respect their ancestors whose skulls still remain there. And if you feel energy at all, right, it's just a truly profound experience that really gets you to rethink things internally. And we do have a video on our YouTube that you can check out, youtube.com/WeBlogTheWorld, and just type in Skull Island. So all things spiritual. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention this, because we do lead mindfulness retreats and we do mindfulness courses and so forth. But what do we mean by spiritual, right? We don't mean religious. We do mean everything consciousness, around consciousness, right? Without the dogma. So yoga retreats and sound healing, even if you're not a yogi, right? There's lots of retreats where you can go to where there's meditation and other activities. We do a lot of like wine and food pairing and tasting at the events that we do. And then Ujjayi pranayama, right? This is also called the ocean breath. And I'm sorry that my partner isn't here today, because he's really an expert at this Ujjayi pranayama, right? They do this a lot in soft martial arts like Qigong, but they'll also do it, yogis do it, meditators do it. But it's a really great way to get centered, right? So when we're in that stressful moment and we're traveling and the flight's delayed and, we have all of this uncertainty and doubt, right? It's just a really, actually quite quick way to kind of get yourself grounded and connected. And then the other thing that's kind of emerging right now, and I don't know if you're aware of that or not, but things like indigenous sweat lodges, right? As a way to purify. Even people who have had COVID have been doing these sweat lodges as a way to kind of purify and also strengthen their immune system. And then, of course, drum circles. We do a lot of drum circles all the time, really powerful stuff. They say that the drum is the heartbeat of the earth, right? And so if you've ever had that experience or haven't had that experience, I'd encourage you to do so, because what starts to happen is, even if you don't know how to drum, you start to find that the entire group gets into rhythm with each other. Literally gets into rhythm with each other, even if they don't have rhythm to begin with. And there's there's a conversation that's happening, right, between the people who are playing the drums. And then of course channeling, you may not even know what that is, but they definitely do in the East. They're much more familiar and comfortable with the word channeling, and that's starting to come into mainstream circles as well now. So we bring up Japan not because we think that Japan is more spiritual than any other country, but it is one of our favorite countries for spiritual connections. We spent time with a Shinto priest there learning from him. And there's other spiritual masters, right? Shintoism, it's funny because we didn't really know a lot about it before we went there. And, we are very spiritual. And so, we thought, but it's not really a religion, right? Sometimes people think it's a religion. It's really a way of life. You could liken it to our Western paganism in the sense that they're connected to the earth and everything they do is connected to the earth. And this is one of the things we love about Japan. The way they build their architecture there, their hotels, their homes, their buildings, right? Their schools, right? Nature is an integrative part of the architecture, right? And that will tell you a lot about how deep and profound the culture is, and one of the reasons that we love spending time there. And then, of course, staying in a local onsen. So I don't know if you're familiar with onsens, but this is another very big part of local Japanese culture. And they've become sort of more common in the sense that Westerners want to experience them. So there's many onsens that are more Western influenced. And by Western influence, this is what I mean. So it's like having your own apartment, right? Or your own little mini house, right? So it's a great thing to do with family because there's lots of space. All of your dining happens there. They bring you the food there. You don't really leave there. It's kind of this your own secluded place, and a lot of times there's thermal waters, rest in and your own private seclusion. So the more Western onsens, right, have the options of Western food in the morning. And so, if you're not familiar with having, Japanese food for breakfast, right, like we do in the West, but we, out of the 5 onsens that we stayed in, 2 were only locals, so had no other Westerners there. So no English is spoken. You really have to go back to the beginning of this presentation to the point of, right, being open to being uncomfortable, right, getting out of your own way and just going to the heart and saying, yes, please, because I know this is going to shift my life for the better. So other great spiritual experiences, Nepal and, of course, Tibet, 2 other of our favorite places to go. Spend time with a monk. It's really about being open to the unknown and open to what you fear most. Maybe I should say that. Being open to what you fear most. The Holy Festival, also known as the Festival of Love in India, looks like a lot of fun, right? But there's a spiritual component to it as well. So it's like fun meets adventure meets culture meets the spiritual component. And there's, tons of these festivals around the world that happens, 1 or 2 times a year. So lastly, in this category where spirituality meets nature is guided ayahuasca. Is everyone here familiar with ayahuasca? No? Okay, so ayahuasca is another, like forest bathing, is becoming a trend, not just among millennials. We're seeing it certainly a lot in Silicon Valley too, and a lot of Burning Man people, right? And they kind of get curious about the ayahuasca journey. And it's essentially a medicine plant journey that you take. And you're guided by a shaman. So the reason we bring it up is because we lead a lot of spiritual, mindful, not just retreats, because actually with COVID we haven't been able to travel anywhere, so we've been doing online courses via Zoom. But people ask us all the time about this, is it safe? Should we do it? And really the key here is, because like anything, as things start to become more popular, more people offer it. And this isn't something that more people should offer without some serious experience. So it is a way to open. It is a way to kind of ignite that internal compass, right? And to wake yourself up. because you are like kind of like the shamans do. You're going into different dimensional realms, right? When you take this plant medicine, frog medicine. This is another thing that's kind of emerging as people wanting to do, and mostly where they offer it. Peru is a big place, right? In the jungle, the Amazon jungle, but also Central America. So you just want to make sure that you have a really seasoned guide if you're going to experience with anything, any plant medicine, right? Psychedelics too, the same thing. So anyway, just wrapping up here. So, these are really some of the things that we just talked about, is the ways that we have really kind of ignited us from within so that we start showing up traveling differently. This is really the kind of full circle. So it's not really saying not to do all of those external, remember all the external fun things that we talked about at the beginning, the jumping out of airplanes, the thrill factor, whatever that is for you. But when we're doing it from the ego self or from the head self, and we're not doing it from the heart self, we're not aligned and it's not really feeding our soul. So that full circle message is really showing up, being present, being truly present with the people that you're with, being truly present with the land and the interconnectedness of that land, and realizing, right, if we could only realize, if anything that COVID should have done for us, right, is realize that we are all interconnected. We're all one, right? And that is like, once we realize that interconnectedness and that oneness of who we are, we don't show up with fear anymore, right? All this fear-driven stuff that we're getting from the media now, right? There's no place for it, right? That's the ego speaking, right? So we're really talking about heart-centered, and the way to know whether you're actually tapping into this, we call it the fear grid, right? The fear grid. When you tap into the fear grid, guess what starts to happening? Polarity, judgment, right? Divisiveness. So you kick that to the, right? Am I making a decision based on fear or love? Interconnectedness, whatever you want to call it, right? Maybe love is too much for a travel show. Interconnectedness, compassion, empathy, right? Maybe these are easier words. But this is the magic and mystery that we have when we travel from a place of heart and interconnectedness. And here's the really cool thing. When you start putting this into practice for yourself, I'll call it a mindfulness practice. Once you do that, compassion and empathy become who you are. It's not just, remember we talked about at the beginning of the presentation, we talked about it's a mindset. So it literally transforms who you are. It's not just about how you travel and how you experience these things. What ends up happening is compassion and empathy follow you home. Magic follows you home. Gratitude follows you home. And then suddenly you start showing up with the people that you love and care about in a different way, and that divisiveness that, sometimes cripples us from really living our full potential goes away, just like literally falls away. So really it's about connecting and awakening, not just for your mind, but your body and your soul. It's really a triage. You're connecting all of those things every single time we travel.